Good morning, learners. Our subject for this morning is Science 5 for Quarter 2, Week 5. And our topic is Reproductive System in Plants. And the objective is, at the end of the lesson, you are expected to describe the plant reproductive system responsible for the process, specifically sexual reproduction. Like animals, plants are also capable of reproduction. They reproduce in many ways. In general, plants exhibit both sexual and asexual reproduction. New plants can be produced through seeds in different parts like the stem, leaves, roots, etc. These are the reasons why you can see plants anywhere, especially in the forest where they get good physical condition. This lesson is intended for you to describe the plant's reproductive system responsible for the process, specifically sexual reproduction. The different activities that you will encounter in this lesson will lead you to understand how different parts of the plant functions in producing their own kind. Plants have many ways on how to reproduce. Some of their parts are used to produce their own kind. Do you know of any plant in your community that grows another new young plant through their leaves or stalk? Okay, so before we're going to answer that question, let us answer learning task 1. So study the pictures, name the plant, identify the parts of the plants used for reproduction. I'm going to answer the first picture and then you will answer the second and the third picture. So for the plant name for the first picture, we have petchai, and the parts used for reproduction is the seed. So this time you are going to answer the first and the second and the third picture. Malunggay or horseradish is a common plant found anywhere in the community. It has a lot of health benefits. Based on different studies, its parts are used for medicinal purposes. Now, let us continue answering learning task 1 for the questions. So, which part of the malunggay plant is used to reproduce its kind? And what part of the plant seeds are developed? So here are the answers. For the first question we have, it is the stem and seeds are used to reproduce. And the second question, the seed develop from the flower, and that is the answer. Flower is an accessory organ of the plants used in sexual reproduction. Flowers can be classified as complete and incomplete. A flower is said to be complete when it has both male and female reproductive parts. On the other hand, it is incomplete when it has only one reproductive part, either male or female.
In this video, we will be looking at sexual reproduction in plants. Did you know that there are an estimated 390,900 plant species known to science? This diversity of plant species is in part due to sexual reproduction. In plants, sexual reproduction is carried out in the flowers. The flowers contain the sexual organs. Let's start with labeling the different parts of a flower. The petals and the sepals help protect the flower bud and can be brightly colored or scented to attract pollinators. The stem and the receptacle are the parts that connect the flower to the rest of the plant. The stamen is the male part of the flower. It consists of the anther, where pollen is produced, and the filament, which is the stalk that supports the anther. These structures are responsible for the production and the positioning of pollen, the male gametes. The female part of the flower is called the carpel, and this consists of 3 parts: the stigma, a sticky gland for pollen, the style, where the pollen grain descends, and the ovary, where the female gametes or sex cells are located. Within the ovary, ovules produce female gametes. So how does pollination work? Pollination is a transfer of pollen from the male anther of one flower to the female stigma of another. Flowers can be pollinated in different ways, by wind and water, or by pollinators such as insects, birds, and other animals. Flowers pollinated by pollinators are structurally different from those pollinated by wind or water. Look at the differences in size, scent, and color of the petals, and the positioning of the stamen and style. Here are some key differences. Why do you think they are different? Did you know that pollinators are very important to our food supply? They pollinate plants that are responsible for bringing us 1 out of every 3 bites of food. Once a plant has been pollinated, fertilization can occur. Fertilization results in the production of seeds. A mature pollen grain containing 2 male sex cells has landed on the female stigma of the same species. The pollen grain grows a pollen tube that goes down the female style to the ovary, where it enters through an opening called the micropyle. The male sex cells travel from the pollen grain down to the pollen tube to the female ovule. Here, one male sex cell fuses with the female egg, fertilizing it. This develops into a seed. The other male sex cell attaches to 2 cells in the embryo sac, forming an endosperm. This provides the starchy food for the seed to grow. The ovary enlarges and becomes a fruit, surrounding the internal seeds. The fruit and seeds are dispersed in many ways, some even by humans, where they will again grow into a new plant under the correct conditions, completing the long cycle of sexual reproduction in plants. So there we have sexual reproduction in plants. Pollination has to happen before fertilization. The male pollen is produced in the anther, where it is then dispersed during pollination. The female parts of the flower are the stigma, style, and the ovary.
Please like and share our videos with your friends. If you have any questions that you want help with, just comment below.
Did you enjoy watching the video? Okay, very good. So most plants important to agriculture like corn, rice, wheat, and soybeans are flowering, which means that they undergo sexual reproduction. Flowers are parts that indicate a plant is producing seeds. When seeds are produced, it means that plant performs sexual reproduction. Different parts of the flowers are involved to do such process. Peduncle, also called as pedicel, is the stalk of the flower that is important to hold the fruit, while receptacle is the thickened stem part attached to the peduncle, and it is where the flower or group of flowers grows. Sepals, it pronounced as sepals, encloses and protects the upper part of the flower, especially when the flower is still a bud. Sepals are considered modified leaves, which means they have special function. A flower has always a collection of sepal called calyx. This time, let us answer learning task 2. All plants that bear flowers are called flowering plants. Flowers are useful in process of fertilization among plants. And below is a figure showing the parts of a flower involved in fertilization. Study the figure and label the parts of a flower. They copy this in your notebook. Okay, I'm going to give you time to answer this. Okay, let us answer learning task 2. So here are the answers for the parts of a flower. For the first part, we have the anther. The second part, we have the filament. The third part, we have the stigma. And the fourth part is the style. The fifth, we have the ovary. Sixth, we have the ovule. The seventh part, we have the petal. And the eighth part, we have the sepal. Okay, now this time let us answer learning task 3. Compare and contrast the two types of pollination. Use the illustrations to answer the questions found in the boxes. So we have the picture for the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. So for the question, we have, in what part of the flower are pollen grains located? And then, in what part of the flower pollen grains are transferred during pollination? And how many parts are involved in the process? Now for the cross-pollination, we have these following questions. In what part of the flower are pollen grains located? And in what part of the flower pollen grains are transferred during pollination? And how many flowers are involved in the process? So let us give you time to answer this. Okay, for the self-pollination, and the first question is, in what part of the flower are pollen grains located? So the answer is anther. And then for the second question, we have the stigma as the answer. And for the third question, we have only one plant. Now for the cross-pollination, the first question is, in what part of the flower are pollen grains located? And the answer is an anther in the first part or in the first plant. And for the second question, the stigma in the second plant. And how many flowers are involved in the process? The answer is 2 plants. Now, self-pollination is blank, while cross-pollination is blank. So let us answer this. So self-pollinations happen when the pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower in the same plant, while cross-pollination is a process that requires two individual plants of the same species. And let us answer another activity for the learning task 3. So the transfer of pollen grains from flower A to B is called self-pollination. And the transfer of pollen grains from flower B to flower C is called cross-pollination. This time, let us answer learning task 4. Name 3 plants and identify the pollinators by completing the chart below. Illustrate pollination takes place in each flower. Draw this in your notebook. Okay, this time you are going to answer learning task 4. And that concludes our lesson for this morning. Congratulations and thank you for watching. See you next time.